Chris and Mads, sisters who love a good story.
The only thing better than experiencing a good story is talking about it.
We're here for the unfiltered, unhinged conversations with fellow story lovers and storytellers.
And the occasional rant or rave about the shit that rips our hearts out and puts us back together again.
The stuff that makes us laugh till we pee our pants.
And the ones that teach us what it is to be human. Welcome to the sisterhood.
Hi guys. Today we have to talk about our favorite series of all time. Kristen and I read Red Rising in 2023, so it's been about a year, and nothing has ever topped this for us.
I think we're still searching for what we felt in this series. It's also not over, which is like a good and a bad thing because we're both like eagerly waiting for book 7. It's taking so long for book 7 to come out. I'm really glad that Pierce is wanting to do it right. We appreciate this. And also, I know I'm going to have to reread or do some sort of a summary before I go into the 7th book because we don't even have a release date. But we're being patient.
We're being patient.
It's just hard.
We're assuming if you're here, if you follow Kristen and I, that you've probably read this. And if not, you're probably going to want to leave the video at this point because we're not going to control ourselves for spoilers. This is going to be us just like dishing, deep diving as much as we can about why we think this series is unbeatable for us, like why it sticks with us and why it's had the impact it's had. So leave now. Leave now if you haven't read it because you're about to be spoiled, and so much of the fun of this series are the twists and turns you never see coming.
Yeah, I think that if somebody had spoiled beforehand, it would have made me way less motivated. But some of these books are chunkers, and you just don't care. It reads so quickly because you have to know what's going to happen to these characters that you are obsessed with. And that's one of the things that started right from the beginning. In the very first book, I was listening on audio. I listened to the whole thing on audio. I highly recommend if you feel like these are too long for you to physically read. It helped me do it faster for sure. I was in the car on my very short commute to work. Like, it is too short of a commute. But of course, during this short commute, I'm listening to Darrow's wife, Io, being hung and him pulling her legs. I'm like 30 seconds from my job, looking at the parking lot, just tears falling down my face. And I'm like, nobody prepared me for the emotional impact that I was going to feel from the beginning. I mean,
it's a really powerful beginning.
I just think, like, it blows my mind that this is Pierce's first book and that he was able to draw. It's some sort of wizardry that I was immediately, like, so invested in Darrow. Is it Darrow or Darrow? We should just talk about this because people ask me and I'm like.
I always just say Darrow.
Darrow.
Yeah.
I just cared so much about his mission from, like, he is going to avenge his wife. Like, fuck the people that hung her.
It's so interesting looking back on Red Rising after finishing the series because you realize that he's going to end up in the household with Augustus, who hangs Io. Like, it blows my mind. I think that the thing that solidified this series as a top for me is in book 1. And I know that people are like, book 1's just okay. And for me, I'm like, okay, once Darrow's at the Institute and he's met Tactus, we hate Tactus, and, you know, Mustang's like, we've got to do something. Like, Tactus is literally essaying all these girls, and, like, what are we going to do? But you can't make an enemy out of him, right? And when Darrow has Tactus whipped and punishment, you're like, okay, all right, yeah, that makes sense. We literally, like, maybe that was actually too light of a punishment for Tactus.
For real.
But then when tells Pax, like, now you also need to give me the punishment too. I was like, this series is fucking transcendent. That illustration of leadership that Darrow does is iconic to me. The fact that he understands from such a young age, it's like exemplified in the way he's going to lead for the rest of the series, but his depth of understanding that in order to win people and in order to have the integrity it will take to carry the burdens he will have to carry as a leader, he is going to have to carry the punishments and consequences of everyone beneath him. forever. And that he's not going to shy away from that. Like, he is not going to protect himself with his status. He is going to take full responsibility for all of the burdens and consequences of those beneath him. I was like, okay, like we're here for this. Like, if we're going to have a main character who's in a position of leadership, who's going to lead a rebellion like this, that's going to be full of violence and slaughter, this is the man we need. This is the man we need. He just, like, became so much more than, like, an angry 16-year-old with a vendetta at that point.
Can we just talk about that he's, like, 16 in this book doing
Jesus.
all the things? I know it helps me to remember that they, like, don't really have childhoods on Mars. Right. And, like, when they're down digging, like, these are also children. But it does kind of blow your mind. And I have had people give feedback to me, like, they're so young, it's so unbelievable. And I'm like, they're also on other planets, and there's, like, this whole hierarchy that is unlike anything. I'm just like, it's made up. Just roll with it. Just roll with it. Did
Red Rising hit you the way it hit me, or did it take to Golden Sun for you to really get sold?
I was hooked at Red Rising. I actually am kind of offended when people say that they don't like the first book, because it was a great time. The most crazy psycho when they hide in the bellies of the horses.
Oh my God.
Like, Severo immediately, I was like, this feral dude is my, like, ride or die. Yeah. I love his character so much. Honestly, Cassius is such a great character, but seeing him mourn the loss of his brother that Darrow killed, Julius?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, like,
Julian, but yeah.
Julian. I was like, I can't. Yeah. I fell in love with the character. I fell in love with Mustang when they're, like, cuddling to stay warm, and you find out that she's, like, a baddie, and she, like, had her own castle that she was running.
Yeah.
And she's so smart. I think the first book is incredible. Mm-hmm. It is such a great setup. I mean, you get to know Rogue. I mean, you get to know so many people. Who's the howler that dies and sacrifices himself at the end of this book? Pax, who he later names
the ship
son.
And his son after.
Yes, the ship and his son. I just think it's a wonderful setup. If I was reading it as a standalone, I think I would think it was great. But I think because it starts off a series I love so much, I'm like, oh, it's epic.
It also just is so good on a reread once you've read the whole series, because going back and seeing the inception of the Severo-Darrow-Cassius dynamic is peak. It is so interesting because, yes, from the jump, Darrow has killed Cassius's brother. And then once we move into Golden Sun, you know, we find out how involved Cassius is in the murder of Severo's dad.
Oh my gosh.
And then obviously Augustus, Agold, is responsible for killing Darrow's wife. So it's like there's no reason that these three men should be able to form any kind of coalition or alliance at all. They all have every reason to hate each other. They've all taken from each other, except Severo. Poor Severo, who didn't take from anyone. But the fact that Severo is able to just support Darrow is like a relationship for the ages.
Dude,
like, fuck my life.
I just think it's so crazy that at one point Darrow goes into this, like, dinner party thing.
Yeah.
And Cassius is there with Mustang, and he's just like, the fuck? I remember being like, gasped.
Gag.
Like, how is she? But she, I know she was being sneaky.
Yes.
But she also just, I feel like, saw the good in him that Darrow had, like, decided to be like, I forget about it. Because Cassius at the end of book 1 finds out that Darrow killed his brother.
Yeah.
And he thought it was somebody else the whole time. And so they're, like, dueling. And Darrow just, like, takes his arm. I don't know if I had a friend that just, like, took my arm in a duel would be willing to be, like, friendship material in the future. No. But they, like, overcome
and
this.
Takes the woman.
Takes his woman.
Didn't even include Mustang in that because, like, for Mustang, like, how on earth does Darrow form feelings for Mustang given that her dad killed his wife? I mean, like...
Well, and his dad's trying to, like, hook them up.
I know.
Like,
it's so I think that intricacy of politics and the relationships is what's so fascinating to me. The fact that these people can become kindred spirits when, like, the world they're in has set them up to be enemies and they've all fallen prey to it. Like, they've all taken from each other so greatly. Like you just said, Darrow takes Cassius's fucking arm. Like,
I know. I'm just like, oh, it's over this time.
Oh, it's
murders
done.
The brother, takes his arm.
Yeah.
He's fucking his girl. I'm just like, oh, God.
Oh, God.
But I will say, though, I think Cassius's arc is actually one of my favorites.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And at first, like, you just are so unsure about him. Really
so
loved
in
it.
Golden Sun, I think that the biggest gasp, I mean, people love this book because it's reveal after reveal after reveal at the end. And I do think, well, in the book 1, we find out that Fitchner is Severo's father.
Right.
And that was like a pretty big reveal, but I think the bigger reveal is that Fitchner is the son of Ares.
Right. He is
Ares.
Ares.
He's Ares. And so when you find that out, and then you find out that he loved a red and that Severo is a half red, I mean, that is just insanity. And then you never, ever, ever suspect, because Cassius is set up to be Darrow's foil, you never suspect Roke.
Right.
You never suspect him that he's going to be the one that just can't handle that Darrow is a red.
I know.
And I actually kind of forget how Roke finds out he's a red, but I think it's because Mustang encourages him to tell the truth, and he finally confesses to her and to Ragnar first.
Right.
He like, that's the big thing, is he finally tells Mustang.
Well, it's
and
at
Ragnar
the end of book 1 he tells Mustang that he's a red.
No, that's the end of book 2.
Book 2 he does?
Yeah. When he takes her to his mother.
But, like, I hated the way she reacted to it. I was so pissed. I was just like, Mustang, use some emotional intelligence here. You guys have been through a shit ton.
Yeah.
What's the big deal?
Right.
But I guess it's...
But it's actually Ragnar who defends him.
I know. And
Ragnar!
When he gives Ragnar a freaking blade that, like, only golds are supposed to have, not the sling blade, a razor.
Yeah.
He gives him a razor, and everybody's like,
Da-na-na.
the travesty, and he's just like, this is like how I'm gonna operate things. Like, he earned his place with me and my crew.
I also think Golden Sun is where we see Darrow come into the political machinations that are going to be at play for the rest of the series, because that's when he first gets the idea that's like, the Reds are never going to be able to defeat the higher colors. We have to start a civil war. Like, when he figures out that he can turn the Alloons against Augustus, brilliant. Like, he's like, I'm going to turn the golds against each other. I'm going to free the Obsidians, who by far have the most physical potential to overwhelm the golds. It's like he starts bending the system on its head and figuring out how, instead of just tearing down the system, he's like, how am I going to use the system against itself? And that is where we start seeing his peak strategizing.
Right. And the Iron Rain comes in book 2.
Yes, that's their first Iron Rain, because he does it on Mars.
Which is just so crazy, because they do the Iron Rain and they're all like, yeah, let's get it. And I'm like imagining all the rock music and like they're just like, you know, and then they're like stuck in a mud puddle. Yeah. And they're like all drowning. And I'm like, wait, what the fuck? This is the most anticlimactic. Like, literally everybody dies except for him and Ragnar get like pulled out.
Barely. They barely survive.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. And then the end, like, everyone is just fucked at the end. Like,
Cassius' whole family is dead at the end except for him and his mother.
Yep.
They're the only survivors.
Victra is shot in the spine. Darrow's taken by the Jackal. Like, the Jackal totally takes his revenge in this book. My God.
He is
sinister.
The evilest. I mean, I guess in the second 3 books, we have another very sinister man, but I just remember him giving me the creepos.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was creepy even in, he just, like, his mental illness, like, book mental illness.
What is the thing in Red Rising about taking people's hands, too? Because
he lost
Darrow
a hand,
also
too.
takes the Jackal's
He'd
hand.
be taking hands right in the, but also Severo only has one eye. I kind of forgot
always
about.
forget that, too.
Yes, he's like a one-eye patched guy, but then he takes his eyes later.
He takes Darrow's eyes.
Which is like, okay, friendship? Okay. What kind of a friendship is this?
Symbolic?
So after book 2 and book 3...
Morningstar. Okay, this book has so many iconic moments, but again, I think that where we see this full circle moment of Darrow's leadership is when Severo has Cassius in custody. Like, the Reds have Cassius, and they want to execute him because he's a gold. He killed Ares, and... God, Severo just, like, shows that he has really been watching Darrow and come into his own brand of leadership, because he does the whole thing of, like, Darrow taking the whipping for Tactus. He's like, if you're gonna hang Cassius, hang me too. And he fucking hangs himself along Cassius. And Zephy just comes and he's like, boys will be boys. It just cuts them down. Well,
and Zephy is Ragnar's sister, who is a character that I really loved. And I will say that when she is no more, it really... I kind of felt like there was... And I'm trusting Pierce on this, but I felt like there was a little bit of missed potential
With
for her.
Steffi.
I wanted more of her. I guess that's what it was. Is I was like, oh, I was not
Yeah.
ready to let go of that
Well,
character.
he set her up so perfectly to rule the
She kills her
Obsidians.
mother after her. I think Ragnar was killed by. Her name is Asia.
Aja. Yeah.
Aja, and
Oh my God, when Ragnar dies, I wept.
yes, and Lysander's in the picture by now.
As a baby. He's like still
like
a little
10.
Yeah, he's like a child.
Yeah, he's
a little
maybe
baby
10.
child.
Yeah.
But yeah, when Ragnar dies, I was just like, at that point, I really thought there's no coming back for Cassius, for me, in the redemption arc. But this is why Pierce is so brilliant, because then there's the whole hanging scene, and I'm like, oh, and then oh my God.
Wait a second. Did Cassius kill Ragnar?
No, Aja did, but they were
Yeah.
together on the ship.
Oh, yes.
So I was
Yes.
like, it's actually Cassius's fault because he's still tracking Darrow.
And he just
For
can't
the
let
queen.
shit go.
Yeah.
He's like, you killed my family. I'm not going to, you have my
Okay.
other hand.
So the real question is, did you ever believe at the end that Cassius had actually killed Severo and cut off Darrow's hand? At the end, did you really believe Severo was dead?
Okay, so yes, I did. And also I was like, that doesn't feel right because it happened too suddenly.
fast.
And I was like, Severo's been with us for 3 books
Yeah.
now. We know that he is like a key character. So I was suspicious. This book honestly has made me very suspicious. Anytime they're
Every
like,
time.
she fell off a cliff, she's probably dead. I'm like, wait till I see the body and they tell me there's no pulse. And even then, maybe not. Like,
Right.
I just do not trust.
I don't
the death,
trust.
which makes it really,
Oh, sorry.
which makes it really fun. But no,
It does.
that scene was crazy. So basically, it looks like Cassius is working with the crew, and then Cassius at the end turns on them. So he's like taking them to the Empress.
Yeah, he shoots Severo.
Shoots
he
Severo.
cuts Darrow's hand off
Yeah.
in vengeance.
So and then Mustang's there. They're all there, and then they get to go because of that. And Cassius is bringing them to the Empress.
And even then, when they spring their trap and show that Severo's not dead and they like start attacking, then the Jackal has the last word because he's like, I have the atomics. Like, I will blow up
Yes,
everything
he's been
if you
manipulating
kill me.
her. He's been manipulating
Yes.
her. That's why she's been working with him, is because he's like, I will blow everything up if you
Yes,
don't work with me.
and that is how they get, that's how they get the Empress to side with them for 2 seconds, basically. They get her armada to help them because they have to take down the Jackal's ships. Oh my God. It is so intense of an ending. Oh, and we totally skipped over, Jesus, that Darrow does makes his most pivotal choice in this book when he betrays the Rim. And other than that, I think this would have been a perfect conclusion. But the reason I'm so glad that we have the next 3 books in the
Yes, we
second
needed
phase
them.
of the series is because Darrow never faces the consequences in this series of the choice he made to betray
Is
the
it the Sons of
daughters,
Ares?
the daughters of Ares in the Rim.
Yes.
He gave them up and he blew up the docks and set the Rim back at least a decade in terms of their formidability in
Yeah.
the galaxy or in the solar system. So
And he does come to regret
Oh.
that, and like he doesn't like stand by it, which I appreciate, because I was like, what the fuck, dude? Like, you can't just kill all these people. And they were people who like believed in him.
oh
and
my
were
God,
rooting
I
for
know.
him.
I
It's
know.
like
Ugh.
killing your own army.
It's genocide. And it's like, we would never... I mean, he would be canceled so fast in today's culture.
Yeah. Oh, Dara
For
would
sure.
have been canceled many a time.
so many
a time.
reasons.
Oh, Victra beats the shit out of her sister in this
I
one.
do love that
Which
part.
I love. All of a sudden, I was like, oh, she's a baddie with a fatty, I'm sure.
Yes, because, and Victor and Severo get married in this book, and I remember thinking, like, it really wasn't until Morningstar that I started actually thinking of Victra as part of the crew.
No, me too, because she comes from a nasty family. I guess that's everybody, right? All of these families have had wealth and power, and they've been nasty, and you meet their siblings, so you just, like, associate all the siblings. Because her sister was horrid. Absolutely horrid. She was obsessed with the
Antonio?
Jackal. Oh my gosh. No. The end of this book, the biggest gasp was,
That Mustang's pregnant.
yeah, Mustang had a baby. She's not pregnant. She had a baby while he was like, remember, he was tortured for a year by the Jackal.
Yeah.
He was tortured for a year.
We
had
just
to be,
gloss over that.
Had
He
to
was-
be rebuilt by Dancer. We fucking love Dancer. Was rebuilt by Dancer and his carvers. And at the end, you find out that she was pregnant by him before he went to be tortured for a year in solitary confinement. And
She was already pregnant
She
when
was
he
keeping
told
him
her
safe.
that he was a red.
baby making.
Baby making.
Like, come on, Pierce. Like, you couldn't
the
give
fact
us
that they
a little bit
get
more.
a little bit of a happily ever after in this book is
I
nice
know.
until you get to Iron Gold and you're like, oh, well, you know.
But it was a great conclusion. If you're trying to convince other people to read this series, as Maddie and I do, I think it is helpful to break it down into, like, just read the first 3. You'll feel so satisfied. I've done this for coworkers. I've done this for friends. And then afterwards, when they feel good, I'm like, take your time. Enjoy a month or 2 of, like, yes. And then pick this shit back up and get ready to have your heart ripped out again.
Yeah, with Iron Gold.
With Iron Gold. So Iron Gold would be down here. So,
okay, I just want to be frank that Iron Gold is probably my... Hey, did you guys see my sweatshirt, by the way? This is my Red Rising sweatshirt. Anyways,
I got it for her.
Yeah, Kristen got it for me as a gift. Okay, so Iron Gold, I think, is... While I think a brilliant book on its own, I definitely feel like it's a big departure from the original series. And so I do think it's tough for people to get into. And I think people are often on the fence once they read this book of like, why did I continue?
Right.
And
there's just it's very different pacing. It's got multiple point of views. We have Lyria. We have
Lysander, which is the best.
Lysander. Of course, we still have Darrow, but we also have...
Ephraim.
I always his name is so unique. I love Ephraim. But I remember feeling jolted. It's just so different than the first series. But I liked it.
I did too.
Didn't dislike any of these books. There were definitely hard parts in every book. But this being 10 years in the future and that Severo has 3 daughters and his wife's pregnant again and that their kids are being raised with Darrow and Mustang's little boy. Some things about it were just it's fantastic to me. And now I feel like Darrow has a new purpose because he just wants to be with his family. He just wants there to be enough peace that he can live. He's just been giving and giving and giving ever since they turned him into a gold. Sacrificing everything. And I think now he has really a new purpose of why he's creating. It's less about vengeance for his first wife, and it's more about creating a new life with his family. And I want it for him so bad.
I do too, but I also think that Pierce Brown is showing his caliber of writing in this book in the sense that you can see how well he has researched Roman politics. You can see how well he's researched democracies. The fact that the Senate is the way that it is feels really believable to me. And I think just recognizing there's so much to overcome in trying to create a society of equals when physically they're not equal. The Reds as a military cannot stand up to the other factions. The Pinks as a faction can't stand up. So trying to create a government is complicated. And I think that this is so well illustrated in Mustang and Darrow's conversations. You can feel Mustang's frustration.
Yeah.
And you'd get this more and more as the series goes on, but it's Mustang she's not superior in the value of a human soul, but she's superior intellectually to everyone. She's superior physically. Yeah. So it is difficult to suffer idiots for the sake of her higher value, which is equality and for everyone to have a seat at the table. And I just think that Pierce really shows some range in his ability to show this and to deliver a fun plot. But he's really going there with the complexity of trying to create a political system.
I was trying to find my solution while reading it, and I was I have no idea. It's so hard too because Dancer is being this very liberal well, we need to keep the golds in place. We need to keep them in their place. I stand for all the red. I speak for the red. And
meanwhile, the Reds are there's a terrorist group controlling
the
Reds.
Red Hand. Yeah, the Red Hand is this terrorist group kills Lyria's family, everybody except for her and her nephew. Her dad is traumatized because he was underground for so long. And when they were liberated as Reds and were able to come to the surface, it's basically camps of tents and just poverty, and they're just
camps.
And she's just this isn't better. So it makes you beg the question, are we making things better? And you kind of feel that throughout this and these next 3 books is, are we making it better? Or have we actually just fucked it up? Was the other system perfect? No. But you by no means think like everything's fixed. All the work that was done in the first 3 books, like we have been freed from our slavers. No.
And crime, I think Ephraim is a great character to show that like crime just thrives when there's political chaos. And I like to think of this book as like a mini heist because Ephraim's, going after the kids but is Ephraim good or is Ephraim bad?
And Volga
is a great... Volga and Ephraim's relationship is really at the heart of Iron Gold, and I love that.
Yes.
But I also think Lysander and Cassius's story, I love Cassius and Lysander together. Like, I love that we get POVs Lysander's point of view. Yeah, because, in Lysander...
His family was murdered.
Yes.
His throne
has been usurped.
Has been taken from him.
Yep.
But he's being trained still and treated with respect by Cassius. And I think Cassius sees who he could have become in Lysander if he had a mentor, which he kind of didn't because his dad was an a-hole.
Yeah.
And he had all of these siblings, and it was just... I think he's trying to raise him correctly, but I also feel like if it was our society, it's like the off-the-grid people. Like, I think he just took Lysander off the grid and was like, we're just going to create our own homestead out here in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
Because I want to raise you right. Like, he was sheltering Lysander. But
so
Lysander
hard.
has childhood drama.
He does. He's so traumatized. I also think it's like through Cassius and Lysander's story that we get to circle back to the Rim and find out the consequences of Darrow's decisions in Morningstar. And that's where we start piecing together like, oh, Darrow wasn't as far thinking as we hoped he was. And he has made critical errors that are about to come back and bite you in the ass. Bring on Dark Age, the darkest book. Can we both agree?
It's called Dark Age, but I mean, and it is dark. I think that in order to have a Lightbringer, you have to have Dark Age. And
agreed.
I do feel like it's hurtful how hard it got. Like, a book should not be allowed, but I allowed the abuse.
Lysander getting his face practically melted off.
It's really hurtful.
Severo is separated from his family. Victra's uber pregnant. I mean, the darkest of the darkest scenes. How can it be such a victorious scene and then simultaneously the most devastating scene I've ever read when Victra gives birth to their son? Such a badass scene. Like, thank you, Pierce Brown, for giving us a natural birth in a book. Like, fuck yes.
I mean, she didn't really have an option with where she was, but yes, it
was.
But
you get the
amazing.
sense that this is just how she births in general.
Yeah, it's almost like she treats it like a battle, like something to get through, and she does it like such a badass. And Volga and Lyria are just like
supporting.
What is happening?
Like, as Kristen and I have both given birth at home, and I just never see that represented. Like, I never see, for female characters, I don't often see a woman being portrayed as a badass in the motherhood realm. It's always like she's a stabby little assassin, which, let's be real, Victra is an amazing warrior. She's a gold. She's been trained and genetically modified to be an amazing warrior. But to watch that translate into how fiercely she protects their young in Iron Gold and how, like, badass she is when she gives birth to their son, only for him to be taken by the red... I'm going to cry. To be taken by the red hand. And this is the most brutal thing Pierce Brown has ever put in a book. It might be the most brutal thing I've ever read in a book, that they take that newborn and slaughter him. I actually want to vomit.
And it kind of like, for me, all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, you didn't just poke the bear. Like,
we are going to annihilate
lit the bear on fire. So now Victra is on a motherfucking mission. And I think that was so hard and traumatic, but I also think it's what sealed the deal for Volga and Lyria, that they were like, oh, we're in this war. Because Lyria was kind of like, leave me alone. Why are you guys putting me in all of this? And now she found, it's like the woman band that I needed in this series.
Yeah, and Volga was just loyal to Ephraim, but I think at this point Volga finds her own mission.
Yes, she found it. Well, because it was her and Lyria were in prison together, and they like became prison cell buddies, which was so cute. Like, it was a little note situation.
I just love this book. As hard as it is where I think Pierce hits his stride in writing the female perspective, and getting Mustang's point of view in this book when she loses Mars. That's in this book, right?
I think so. Is this the one where she gets stabbed in all of her crevices too by the crowds?
Oh my God! And the red day, is that at the red day in the Senate?
I want to say yes. Obviously, me and Maddie are muddied at the end of these books because we just blasted through them so fast.
The point is the Senate goes down
Yeah.
because the Jackal's clone comes back. And
Oh my
Jesus
gosh.
I just can't remember if that's this book or Lightbringer.
Yeah, I don't know.
But Jesus, we just need to hold them both up. They run together because we read them back to back.
I for sure read them back to back. Like the same day that I finished Dark Age, I was already in Lightbringer because I was like, I like that this starts with light and not dark. So let's jump in. I need therapy and recovery and healing.
Yeah.
Lightbringer is really, really amazing for Lysander. Cassius.
Oh my God.
My bro Cassius didn't make it.
But his character arc is like...
There is a scene where it's Darrow, Cassius, and Severo, and they're all on the ship together, and they're cackling together, and all I heard was, the boys are back in town, the boys are back in town. And I was like, yeah! And then, like, 2 chapters later, Cassius is killed, and I'm like,
The way that Cassius
just keeps
dies.
killing people. He's like in an arena, right? And they just keep sending more people. And he keeps saying, like, my honor is still intact. Like, isn't that what he says?
Yeah, but...
There's some line that he just keeps saying, and Lysander's up there just like...
He's another one where you think that he dies in Iron Gold, but gotcha. There was no body.
Shorty.
And that one didn't hit... Like, this time I knew that he was dead for real. And I think that when he says... Yeah, my honor remains. And the fact that Lysander gave him the option to leave and that Lysander doesn't want to kill him, but like Lysander is so far gone at that point that it's just like...
Brainwashed.
Dark Age really fucked up Lysander. And I think the fact that Cassius can't give up on him is another full fucking circle moment.
Cassius, Severo, and Darrow have all had these moments now.
Where like they won't give up.
They decide
like,
they don't move.
They're going to stand by the consequences of their leadership and the people under them. And I think Cassius still sees Lysander as his apprentice in some ways.
Yes.
And he's like, if you fail, I fail. And Lysander fails so hard and then he kills Cassius and I just can't. It's the worst that ever happened.
To be killed by literally your second / real Papacita because he's the one who actually raised you.
Oh my God, I just can't. And then
somehow Darrow has to like forgive Lysander and say like, I believe in you.
But he doesn't yet. He hasn't done that.
In this book?
No, he does not do that.
I don't know why I thought he said like, I believe there's good in him.
No, he does not.
Oh, okay,
there's no coming back
Maybe
for
I rewrote
Lysander.
that in my
Lysander is dead to me. There is no coming back for him.
I thought Lysander was going to have a romance arc at one point. It lasted
I
2
know.
seconds, and I said, okay, Pierce, I'm with you, Mr. Brown.
With
Let's go.
the daughter of the Rim.
Yes,
I
and then
did
she just gets stabbed. And I'm like, are you actually? Oh, not one.
She gets
juicy
annihilated in Dark
The most
Age.
romantic thing that happens is that Severo and Victra, whenever he comes back from war, just like, get
Let's
it on.
get it
And I'm like that
on.
one-eyed man, like my
He
little...
has Darrow's eyes now.
Okay, well, I still think of him as this feral, one-eyed man and I just imagine Victra being literally like the memes of Justin Bieber with his wife when he like looks so ratchet, and then his wife is like this like tall model. I'm like, this is the vibe. But he finds out, that his child has been murdered.
Oh.
And you're just like, you feel all of that grief again, but from a dad being like, so did she have the baby? Like, where's my child?
His first
And you're just like,
son.
they fucked it up again. They fucked it up.
Okay, so
where does this end?
We just have to say one more thing about Lightbringer, and then, we need to talk about Red God. So Lightbringer also, I think, the moment when Darrow goes before the daughters of Ares in the Rim.
Oh, yeah.
And accepts responsibility and is willing to be executed for the betrayal. That broke me. I sobbed during his speech. I was just like, this is peak writing for Pierce Brown. Again, I feel like the biggest theme of this story is leadership and the weight and the burden to lead. And sometimes it's in the individual. Sometimes it's as simple as Cassius being a leader for Lysander. Sometimes it's as big as the Senate trying to lead a society and how heavy the burden is to lead and the weight of the consequences of the decisions that you make, and that the best leaders don't shy away from that responsibility. And when Darrow takes responsibility for the betrayal and knows he needs to die for it, and that he's not going to see Mustang again, he's not going to watch Pax grow up, and that he's failed, I just can't breathe. So in Red God, it's got to be Pax.
This is the thing is, yes, Pax has like also been through it a bit by the end of this book, and you start to just feel hopeful, like maybe it's the next generation that's going to take us home. And like, not to get into politics on YouTube because I'll never do that, but like I do wonder if there would be a benefit to some leaders in our world today to read this, because the themes are the same as in the day of the Romans, as in today. And I think the reason why it brings Maddie to tears, and when I was reading it, it made me emotional, is we don't really see this portrayed very often in the world, where leadership apologizes and is humble and is willing to actually not do that and just expect people to forgive them, but be willing to take out their punishment for being a-holes. It's just very healing for Pierce to take us through characters that you love, and you know that they are wrong, and you know that they're making mistakes, and it is painful to deal with your mistakes, and they will come. Karma is a bitch. And I can't wait to see where he takes it in Red God. I have some hopes and some dreams.
Yeah, me too.
I have some heavy expectations, and I'm sure that's a lot of weight for him. And for a series that I went into thinking, woohoo, sci-fi, let's get it, to feeling like it's actually a part of my DNA now. I trust him. I think he's going to do a great job, but I will say the expectations are high. It's going to be a lot to wrap up in one book.
It is a lot to wrap up, but I just trust him. The reason I always say I trust Pierce Brown is because I think exactly what you just said. I think that he knows his true north. I know he knows what he's trying to do with this series, and as great as he is at reveals and entertainment and a fast-paced plot, I think that he has set out to portray the weight of leadership. And exactly what you just said. I wish everyone would read this series and actually apply it to the way that we view leadership in our world today, because I think that the flip side of needing leaders who take responsibility and for being imperfect and apologize and accept consequences is that we need to see that leaders aren't perfect, and they can't be. And we can't hold them to a standard of perfection, but what we can hold them to is a standard of integrity and accountability. And if we had that, we would have better parents, better leaders, better teachers, better politicians, better trainers and executives, business owners. It's like, we don't need perfect people. We need integrity and we need accountability. We need consequences that create balance, that create us, and there are impossible choices. I think Pierce does a good job of showing that leaders face impossible choices every day. And we, as people being led, need to have grace for that there are impossible choices to be made. And I think that's why Darrow is such a compelling character.
Yeah, you never think of him and think, oh, perfection.
No.
Like, he's not my book boyfriend.
No.
He's not, like, he is so complex, and
so is Lysander.
Everybody is so morally great. Yes. Even Cassius, like all these characters, but like you see the good in them, and you also know that they're going to try to do better. And that is like the biggest thing in this series, I think, is that for each of our characters, when they fuck it up, I feel like they use it as fuel to do better, which I think we could all do.
And I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think the most powerful characters are written not just to defeat their enemies, but to master themselves. And all of our Mustang, Severo, Cassius, Darrow, Victra, Lyria, Ephraim, Volga, like you see it again and again and again that yes, they're up against incredible high stakes, but at the end of the day, they're going to have to master themselves. And again, that is something we could all stand to be inspired by. I think it's the best. We like try to top it. There are series I love. I love medieval fantasy. I love sort of Kaigen. There's so many books I love, but I just think this is the one. This is the one for me. And unless he totally trashes Red God, there's like no way. There's no way. I don't know if it can ever really be supplanted as just like a very potent series for me.
I'm going to need to meet Pierce someday.
We need to meet Pierce Brown. We need to interview him on our podcast. We want to crawl inside his little brain, which is actually a big brain.
I know, I was going to say, it ain't
We would
little.
like to crawl inside his brain and figure out how he comes up with this shit.
We're just grateful. This is a great series.
We hope you guys enjoyed. And if you're big Red Rising fans like us, definitely tell us in the comments what like the iconic scenes that stand out to you and why this series means something to you.